All right, welcome to our second annual kind of series of these things we call Red Talks. And how many of you in here have ever heard of TED Talks or seen those? That's great. So these are kind of modeled after TED Talks, and what it does is it gives our students an opportunity. They're usually about 8 to 15 minutes, uninterrupted, to share what they consider to be a big idea that people need to hear. So today you're going to get to hear two. You're going to get to hear from a senior here, Mark Phillips, in just a second. And then you're going to get to hear from a community member, Sergeant Bert Fall. So kind of the evolution of Red Talks is we started these with students last year, and we're kind of taking it to the next level where we want you to hear from our community members, which you will, Sergeant Fall today, and then Mayor Mike Snyder on Thursday if you're going to come to that. And then you get to hear from our students as well, but then our community members get to hear from our students as well. So connect your kids to our community and community to our kids. So these are being recorded. These will be posted on YouTube because we have to have a limited audience. So kids that can't make it today will be able to watch it in that second period study hall. So guys, I ask you in the audience, please make sure phones and stuff are put away. Give 100% of your attention up to the presenter up here. And please make sure you're wearing your mask properly. The person talking up here will not wear a mask because we're so distant from the rest of you. But please make sure, so we can continue doing these, that you wear your mask properly and that you're all separated, which looks like you did a really good job of doing. So thank you for doing that. So without any further ado, our first speaker today is Senior Mark Phillips. Mark has done an incredible job preparing for this, and I'm not going to say too much because I think you're really in for a treat. His talk is called How to Be Happy, the Philosophy Behind the Smile. So without any further ado, please welcome Mark Phillips.
There is more to happiness than just the grin of immediacy. It's not just getting what you want when you want it, be that the newest iPhone or the last slice of pizza. Happiness is more so a mindset, rather than it is an emotion. Sorry about that. Being content, being fulfilled with more than just yourself and who you are, this is sometimes being referred to as a stoic. But what the heck is a stoic anyway? A stoic is somebody who teaches themselves to be accepting of the circumstances and regardless being optimistic. Now, as you all know, if you know me, I like to make jokes about myself, or I make jokes about the problems that I have going on in my life. It's basically a way to cope and try to see the bright side of things. So if you guys can find something like that as your first step down this path I'm about to show you, you should have no problem finding your own way of being happy. But most people can't tell you exactly what happiness really is. With the never-ending self-help books all telling you different things, it can all become really confusing. So, the answer was actually found and broken down over 2,000 years ago with one word: eudaimonia. Now, eudaimonia isn't just a word that's hard to say and hard to spell. It is a word that has many meanings and is kind of up to interpretation. But the closest word that I can find that matches in English is flourishing, but can also mean prosperity or blessedness. And I know what you're thinking, who am I, just some high school kid up here preaching to you how you can change your life to make your own life better and see a better outlook on the world? Don't take my word for it. Take it from the words of philosophers that lived and died thousands of years ago. For example, Aristotle, he used eudaimonia to lay out a template for what a man basically must do to live a life well lived. That doesn't mean thou shalt give all of thine income to charity or that you can eat sweets once in a while. It means living life intentionally and with meaning, or with virtue. Through this, I believe you can find happiness. Now, perhaps my favorite philosopher, Greek author, and cynic is Diogenes, who lived an immensely virtuous life for a man who had nothing. So, who here knows what a minimalist is? By a show of hands. Alright, how about Bert Fall over here? Want to tell us a little bit?
A minimalist is someone that doesn't need a lot of material objects around.
Yeah, pretty much. That's very good. Now, Diogenes can be described as the ultimate minimalist, which is actually how he found his form of happiness. So let's go back in time for a minute. Diogenes was an extremely wise man who one day felt this overbearing amount of weight on his shoulders. And he felt just awful because he realized that he lived in such luxury at the time as people below him were starving. So one day, he gave away all of his possessions except for one thing: a small wooden bowl used for drinking the congregating water. But even with just this one object, this small bowl, he still found a way to feel guilty when he saw one day a peasant boy drinking out of a puddle with his cupped hands. So he cast out the bowl and he said, "The fool that I am to have been carrying such superfluous baggage all this time." So then he carried on with his life possessionless, yet sorrowless, as he found peace through it. Now, Diogenes found happiness by simply putting himself below the bar that he had set for himself, living day to day and serving others in need. Now, Diogenes is probably known for his most famous encounter, his encounter with Alexander the Great, just a few years before his tragic death. Alexander had heard of Diogenes and was personally intrigued by him. So one day he sought him out, and upon arriving, he gave Diogenes so much praise for the way that he decided to live his life and just all the things that he had done with his life. So when he arrived, he showed up, and Diogenes was lying in a field taking in the morning sun. And Alex asked Diogenes, "If there is anything that I can do for you, I will do it." And Diogenes replied, "Yes, by moving out of the way, since you're covering the sun." Shortly after, Alexander famously proclaimed in his diary, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." This is such a perfect example of two extremes meeting one another. Alexander had all the wealth, status, and power in the world, and was still in awe by a homeless man who had nothing. This draws the connection that the things that we yearn for have little to no satisfaction on their own and can lead to greed. We've all experienced that feeling of wanting more, and that feeling, that awful feeling, can be compared to having an itchy part on your body that's just out of reach. You want to scratch it just to know what it would feel like to get rid of it, and the thought of its pleasure and satisfaction is there up until you actually get to scratch it. The fantasy you imagined is gone. The high fades, and you're left the same. The sensation dwindles, and you have nothing else to go for. Alexander had everything. Diogenes had nothing. But only one of them was truly free. Now, money in and of itself is not evil. I need to put that out there. Having a nice house, having food on the table, and living comfortably, these things are good, unless you let them misuse your time and abuse you. That's when they can become dangerous. What many people need to realize is that what you want isn't necessarily what you want. Let me say that again. What you want isn't always what you want. So, an example. If you see everybody else doing something, you want to do the same thing to fit along, right? So if everybody's buying the new iPhone, you buy the new iPhone. Everybody's listening to the new album or the new hot song that just came out. You memorize the whole album or the whole song just to try to get ahead of the curve because you were just so desperate to get ahead that you don't want to be the outcast or the weirdo. So you're lost. You've stuck. You get ahead. By the time you've prepared yourself for it, it's too late. You've wasted your time trying to fit in and be like everybody else. That trend you just hopped on is gone. The next iPhone just came out. The next hot album just came out. And you're left behind to do it all over again. Now, this format for life is toxic. You've chained yourself down to this lifestyle that you feel out of place, and you did that to yourself. So what you need to do is break free from it. Break free from those shackles. Take the path not traveled. Be weird. Be your own person. Now let me ask you something. If you let everybody else control you and your thoughts, how will you know when you're truly happy? You can't. Let go of worldly possessions as some sort of idol and focus on life. Focus on yourself needing to flourish. Now, flourishing doesn't just happen overnight. Flourishing is more like a butterfly hatching out of its cocoon after bettering itself from its previous form, the caterpillar. Now, as the English philosopher John Locke said, self-discipline is the sole method to obtaining fulfillment and therein flourishing. But before we dig too deep into what that means, we need to understand where it came from. As Socrates once said, to fully understand and engage with ideas, you must understand where they come from. Now, a Greek Stoic by the name of Epictetus was known for his way to educate the city's children. And with over 400 students at one time, he was able to really crack open their minds and make the whole next generation one of geniuses and thinkers. His philosophy was centered around self-discipline, and through self-discipline, meditation. And by meditation, I don't mean shouting monks devoting their lives to silence or sitting still in a room quiet for weeks, if not months at a time. What I mean is setting some time aside to just be alone with your thoughts and simply breathe. That was a good one. By taking time to funnel any anger, sadness, or discomfort through thoughtful silence, you can really grasp what it really means to have control over yourself and to let go of what you have no control over. Now, Epictetus would give very harsh lessons to his students and then give them 1 hour of time in class to meditate and reflect on what they had just learned. Now, as I said, these kids grew up to be extremely wise and to do great things. And one student of Epictetus went by the name of Xenophon, who took his master's ideas of self-discipline and meditation and turned it into a lifestyle. So not only was Xenophon a later philosopher, he was also a small-time farmer for his city, and he was well-liked by practically everybody. Though he had so much work to do as a farmer, he still made time every single day to meditate, even in the darkest of times. An example of this is that on the day that he had been told of his 4-year-old son's death, he replied simply and calmly, "I knew my son was mortal." So you can take this quote to either extreme that you want, but the lesson is to not try to fight against nature and just accept that some things you have no control over. In the words of Epictetus, there are things that you can control, and there are things that you have no control over. But a lot of people don't see that. Xenophon lived by this and flourished through it. He understood that you have control over your own actions, not those of others or of nature. Now, going back to the idea of the butterfly, your worried self is the caterpillar, filled with stress, fear, hatred even. Using self-discipline and meditation, you make your cocoon. You give it time, you practice through that, and enough time, you have your butterfly. With a new focus on life, a new focus on the outcome on the world, and what you can and cannot do. The next man I'm going to tell you about is no philosopher. He was known as one of the 5 good Roman emperors, Marcus Aurelius, this guy here in the middle. Now, his ruling as emperor was heavily opposed, and he lived with chronic pain, but he too followed Epictetus' teachings and used self-discipline and meditation to make himself better each and every single day. In one of his works, he stated, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not of the same blood and birth, but the same mind, and possessing a share of the divine. And so none of them can hurt me. No one can implicate me in ugliness, nor can I feel angry at my relative or hate him. We were born to work together, like feet, hands, and eyes, like 2 rows of teeth, upper and lower. To obstruct each other is unnatural. To feel anger at someone, to turn your back on him, these are unnatural." This whole quote, in and of itself, is so powerful. Turning the other cheek, being disciplined enough to outreach a hand in peace even after you've been gratefully wronged. The wisdom and blessedness that you can obtain by simply being thankful and forgiving is monumental. We see Marcus display these ideas through his actions countless times. He had received, he received word that his friend in general, his close friend in general, Avidius Cassius, had betrayed him. There was a rumor going around that Marcus was either dying or dead. So Cassius took this and declared himself the new Caesar. and began acting as such in Marcus's place. Now, a betrayal of this magnitude would upset and enrage anybody, but Marcus did the last thing you would expect any of us to do. Initially, he did nothing. He sat, he waited, and he meditated for a month, pondering on what he should do. He didn't want to cause panic with his people on word of the betrayal, and he also didn't want to confuse people on who their actual ruler was. So instead, he made the decision, without anger and without hatred, to march against Cassius. Not to kill him, but to capture him. Now, when a friend betrays us, we have every right to be angry. But Marcus controlled his anger. Through this, he was able to succeed in his mission, corner Cassius in his own palace, secure his empire with honor and dignity. Setting aside hatred will free you from the idea that revenge will satisfy you. In reality, getting even will ultimately occupy your time, not necessarily make you happy. So that statement draws me into my final point. If you live your life full of malice and hostility, you'll die the same way. But if you live with peace, blessedness, and virtue, you shall die a peaceful, fulfilled, and content death. As you all know, death is inevitable. There's no way out. And this topic is perhaps my favorite and the most powerful part of Stoicism. We're told to be grateful for the days that we're given. We're told to live in the moment and make every minute count. This idea was referred to as memento mori, or in English, remember death. Now, I don't know much about Buddhism, but the one thing that I've always found intriguing was the idea of reincarnation. If you live a virtuous life, you will be rewarded in the next. But the beautiful thing about this is that even if there is no such thing as reincarnation, you still will have lived a virtuous life. Marcus had the same sentiment as I do, but he put it much more eloquently than I ever could. He said this: live a good life. If there are gods and they are just, then they will not care how devout you have been, but will welcome you based on the virtues you live by. If there are gods but unjust, then you should not want to worship them. If there are no gods, then you will be gone, but will have lived a noble life that will live on forever in the memory of loved ones. So, what can each of us do today to live life more fully and to live virtuously? How are you going to wake up tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after that? Are you going to wake up with a sigh of reluctance? Or are you going to wake up and own the day? When you wake up, be grateful that you did. Remember to take time to meditate, think, breathe. And so, I'm challenging each and every one of you here today to take something that I've talked about and put it in motion. Take your virtue and use that to turn any pain on its head. If you want to be happy, think like these bygone saints did thousands of years ago. Memento mori. Do not let fear control you. Memento mori. Live with practice, and there is no pain or suffering you cannot overcome. Memento mori. Nothing truly valuable can be taken from you. Memento mori. Be ready to let go at any moment and live life to the fullest. Memento mori. Remember death. Set aside your pride and look into the philosophy behind the smile. Thank you.
We have time for just a few questions. So if anybody have a question for Mark about his process, anything he just shared with you, or anything like that, then we're going to have Talia help run the mic to you if anybody has a question. I will start with the most obvious that we always give for these. Why did you choose How to Be Happy? Why is this your topic?
Well, I think I picked it because, like I said at the beginning, I make a lot of jokes about myself and then any problems that I have going on. And so with me doing that as a way to cope, as I talked about, it helps a lot rather than me just being down in the dumps all the time. It can really have that motion to making you more optimistic. And I feel like with me being really interested in these philosophers, if I can take their ideas and then simplify it a little bit to where it's easier to understand, and if that can help anybody that hears it, that I think is awesome. So I I kind of chose it because I like learning about the philosophers. It's helped me personally, and I think it can help other people too.
Okay. Any questions from the audience?
Please, Megan, ask me.
Come on.
Yeah.
Sydney has one. So where's Ty? All right. Ty's going to run the mic around for a couple questions. We'll have time for one more after Sydney, so if anybody has a question, have it ready to go.
So when you were picking out your philosophers, you said that Diogenes was your favorite. What specifically makes him stand out versus all the others to you?
I think a big part of why I really like Diogenes is that the typical notion that people believe, like far too often, is that physical things will like satisfy you, when in reality, as I talked about, you can have absolutely nothing like he did and still have your own way of being happy just by living off of what you need: food, water, oxygen, sunlight. I think that just that basis is like the most simple thing that you need to come to first before even learning about anything else, like meditation or anything like that. I think that just acknowledging that you don't need physical things in order to have a good life is really important to me.
Okay. One more from the audience. Anybody have a question? No. All right.
Yeah.
I got one more. What did you learn, if anything, about yourself when you were going through this process?
I realized that I'm not as dumb as I look, first of all. But also, I don't know, I think that a really big part of it, like just researching it, like kind of helped me, because obviously I didn't practice all these before writing the speech. I had to do some sort of research. But I mean, I have been doing some meditating, and I really think that like that is like a really big thing that helps a lot, just being able to be with yourself and acknowledge that like, hey, I have control over some things, I don't have control over others, and just doing that will bring you so much peace, I promise you. Just acknowledging and not stressing out over stuff that you have no control over, because if you can do nothing to affect the outcome, then there's no need in stressing about it. If there's something you can do to affect the outcome, there's no need in stressing about it. And so I feel like I've been a lot more relaxed recently just since writing this, because it's helped a lot in terms of relaxing, realizing what I